Exum Clement, who was the first woman elected to the North Carolina state legislature back in 1920 before she even had the right to vote. She also became the first woman elected to the state legislature in the entire South. We honor her legacy and her trailblazerness through recruiting, training, and electing pro-choice progressive women across North Carolina. And it's through our 501c3 foundation that we're able to offer programs such as tonight. And it's a very important conversation we're going to have tonight because 4 years ago, there was the Dobbs case that has impacted our access to reproductive health care up and down the spectrum. Excuse me. So, without further ado, I will hand it over to our fabulous moderator, Shannon Bowerly, who is the Executive Director of an independent abortion clinic here in Charlotte for Choice.
Volunteer group as an independent clinic.
Sorry.
Callow might be a little upset about that.
Sorry, Cal. We're interchangeable these days.
Yes, it is. All right, thank you, Tiffany. And thank you to Lillian's List for bringing us all here tonight. It's an honor, although I hate it under these circumstances, to be here to mark the 4 years since the Dobbs decision. It's a moment that fundamentally changed the landscape of reproductive health care in this country. When Dobbs was decided, many of us said this wasn't just about abortion. We said it was about who gets to make decisions about our bodies, our families, and our futures. We said it would create confusion, fear, and barriers to health care. And we warned that once politicians were empowered to interfere in one aspect of health care, they wouldn't stop there. And as we all know, they didn't. Over the last 4 years, we've watched abortion access disappear across much of the South, as well as a great deal of the country. We've seen patients travel hundreds of miles just to receive health care. We've watched providers forced to navigate laws written by politicians instead of medical professionals. And we've seen people delay care, empty their savings, take time off work, arrange child care, and make impossible decisions to access a health care service that was once constitutionally protected. As Executive Director of Charlotte for Choice, these stories aren't just headlines for me. I hear and see them through the people that come to our clinic. I see the anxiety on our patients' faces before they even walk through the door after having to encounter countless protesters. I see the wonderful volunteers that show up before sunrise in the snow, sleet, freezing temperatures, sizzling heat, because they know patients deserve compassion besides harassment. I see healthcare providers continuing to do their jobs with extraordinary professionalism despite an increasing political obstacles. Now here in North Carolina, we've kind of experienced both sides of the post-Dobbs reality. For a time, our state became a little bit of a refuge. Patients came to the Southeast because it was one of the few places where abortion care was still a little bit more readily available. Clinics expanded appointments, abortion funds worked overtime, volunteers stepped up, and communities came together because of how overwhelming the need was. Then in 2023, North Carolina passed new restrictions that added more waiting periods, more paperwork, and more barriers for many patients already navigating one of the most difficult moments of their lives. And as so often the cases, these barriers do not affect people equally. They fall hardest on the people with those with the fewest resources. Young people, low-income families, BIPOC, LGBTQ+ communities, immigrants, and anyone who can't simply take time away from work, travel across the state, afford transportation, childcare, and lodging, let alone the health care that they're seeking. These aren't hypothetical stories or worst-case scenarios. They are the everyday realities that Dobbs unleashed. They are the stories of our neighbors, our communities, and the people who continue to walk through those clinic doors every day. And while abortion is the center of tonight's conversation, the stakes have always been bigger than abortion alone. Dobbs fundamentally changed the relationship between individuals and the government. It forced us to confront a much larger question. Who gets to make decisions about our bodies, our health care, and our future? Who decides whether we have the freedom to make deeply personal decisions for ourselves and our families? Now, for me, that's kind of what reproductive justice is all about. It's not just whether a right exists on paper, it's whether people actually have the resources, the access, and the support to exercise that right. Freedom isn't meaningful if it's only available to those with money, transportation, flexible jobs, or who live in the right zip code. Despite everything that's happened over the past 4 years, there's some hope for me, because I'm seeing more people starting to pay attention. People are beginning to understand that what's happening extends far beyond a single court decision or a single health care service. They understand what's at stake, and they're refusing to accept that the erosion of rights is inevitable. And that's why conversations like tonight matters. We're going to hear from leaders, advocates, and experts who bring different perspectives and experiences in helping us better understand where we are, how we got here, and what we're going to do. My hope is that we leave tonight not only with a deeper understanding of the challenges we face, but with a renewed sense of what's possible when communities organize, advocate, and refuse to look away. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for caring enough to spend your evening in this room. And thank you for standing with the patients, the providers, the volunteers, and advocates who continue to fight every day for a future where everyone has freedom to make their own decisions about their bodies, their health care, and ultimately their lives. Thank you. So let's begin. Thank you. I'm now going to let the panelists please introduce themselves. Caroline, who would like to start?
Hi everybody, my name is Caroline Cobb. I'm a Lillian's List board member, and professionally I work for Deloitte Consulting, where I specialize in military medicine. Specifically, I support the Office of Women's Health for the Navy, so they govern policy and healthcare administration for our active duty female sailors and Marines. And I'm so happy to share the evening with you all.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Diamond Staten Williams. I'm a former House Representative for District 73, that's in Cabarrus County, and I'm a nurse by training.
Good evening, my name is Calla Hales. I'm the Executive Director of Preferred Women's Health Center. We are a group of independent abortion clinics in the southeastern United States. We have 2 locations in Georgia and 2 locations in North Carolina, including one about a mile up the street off Latrobe. This is also the clinic that Shannon was referencing that Charlotte for Choice is our incredible volunteer group that helps out with.
Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to share your perspective and expertise on this and joining us. So let's go ahead and get started, if that's okay. All right, the first question I want to ask is one I just came up with. Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, if you've ever been in one of my classes, you'll know that. 4 years after Dobbs, what's one word or phrase that captures what these last 4 years have looked like from where you sit, from your own experience?
Not to start us off and be very bleak, but I'll say demoralizing.
Demoralizing, true.
I would agree. It's been horrific just to hear the stories and even reading stories as of today about how access has been denied for very real and serious complications.
To kind of just shift gears a little bit, I'm going to say exhausting. I don't think I've ever been this tired
years from now, we won't be feeling that same way. We'll see though. We're gonna do this, I promise. All right, Calvin, we'll start with you. You've had a very front row seat to the impact of Dobbs. When you think about the last 4 years, what's the biggest change that you've seen, not just in laws, but in the experiences of patients and providers who walk through your doors every day?
I would say for patients, one of the starkest changes is just the increased desperation. This was also happening, during and after COVID. So you already are dealing with an overtaxed healthcare system, and for lack of better words, an overtaxed population. No one felt comfortable or safe in their own places and healthcare. Everyone was frustrated. And that frustration and desperation continues and is compounded honestly, every day since. Recently, with economic changes, I think a lot of folks haven't really fully grasped how much that has impacted abortion seekers. Because while we're all dealing with increased costs of living, that is exponentially harder for folks that are having to travel hours of driving and across state lines to get here and to get to seeking abortion care. And that really does shape how a person is going to react and behave and make decisions. And I spoke with a patient earlier this week where we both kind of just realized that if a person can't come up with between $500 and $600, they are going to have to deal with a $2 million plus investment of a child that they may not have wanted. And that's something that is just, I can't even begin to explain how much that hurts my soul. So.
It's understandable. Diamond and Caroline, what about changes that you've seen? I know you can go in more detail about your work in a moment, but.
So I interact with a lot of military medicine providers, so active duty healthcare providers, and even in that instance where you'd think that the military would protect their medical license, it is not always doing so. So a client of mine was, her legacy, if you will, in Navy medicine was advocating for our transgender service members. And the administration got wind of the advocacy that she was doing and the policy pushes that she was making, and they dishonorably discharged her from the Navy. And that is just a travesty.
Loss of income, and service, and reputation. I've seen providers be hesitant, scared, turn people away, which is unfair to them because they've taken an oath to care for people, and that's not the care that they want to provide. With nurses, same thing. With policymakers, it's the same thing, especially in Raleigh, where you're constantly fighting to be heard and to have policy that is going to really empower the community, and being at a stalemate. I mean, even today with the budget, and feeling like your chain is always being jerked.
I see the emotion in your eyes, and also you're talking about money and the logistics and all that, but what about the emotional impact on you?
Exhausted.
Yes, exhausted.
Exhausted, because what's next? You always feel like you are tense up for the next shoe to drop. And what is going to be yanked from us? What is going to be taken from us that we absolutely need? And who is coming to help us fight for it?
I think think Shannon's trying to get me to cry on the stage.
No, I'm not. No, I am not.
But other than exhausted, it has been truly enlightening to see how inescapable this job is for a lot of people. A lot of times when you're working, it's 9 to 5. You can try to leave some of it at the office. You can try to have time for yourself. When you're advocating for something like this, there is no time off. And it's been like this for years. I had a C-section in 2022, November of 2022, and as I was being wheeled out of my delivery, my phone was ringing nonstop, and it turns out that Georgia had lifted an injunction and we were no longer allowed to provide care. And I had no ability to move my hands or feet because I had just been wheeled out of an operating theater, and my husband had to lay my phone on my cheek so I could call all the clinics and tell them they couldn't see patients that day. This is what I mean by inescapable. I cannot walk away because I never know what is going to happen, ever.
Well, since you mentioned Georgia, I want to focus. No, I'm just going on North Carolina. We're going to North Carolina for all of you. We're getting away from the emotions for a moment. Just breathe for a second. How has North Carolina's role as a destination for abortion care in the South changed since Dobbs? And what challenges has that created for our healthcare system? Also, with the understanding is some folks may not be very aware of all the details about Dobbs and what went on. So can someone either expand a little bit more on what Dobbs entails, as well as North Carolina being this destination?
So the Dobbs decision, for lack of better words, reversed the standard that the first trimester of abortion care was constitutionally protected. Because of this, there were several states that had trigger bans in place, meaning several states, especially across the South, and the Deep South in particular, within minutes of a decision, outlawed abortion completely. It was absolutely chaotic because no one really understood how trigger bans would be applied, when they would be active. And in some cases, there were states that were currently fighting legislation or trying to fight a law or a restriction. And where that landed now that the constitutional amendment, or the constitutional protection that their entire lawsuit was based on is no longer there. Because of this, much of the South really sought to come to North Carolina as the first stop for abortion access for the entire Southeast, pretty much. The South fell very quickly. There are at least 13 states in this country that have a complete and total ban, and that's not including a 6-week ban. That's another, I think, 8. It is, in terms of just geographic location, North Carolina is the closest option if you would like to have a procedure in the first trimester. And we can only go to the first trimester. Right after Dobbs happened, we did see a surge. Charlotte specifically saw a major surge of patients coming from cross state lines. After SB 20 happened, with the 2 in-person appointment requirement, that did take a pretty large hit of how many patients could actually continue to seek care here, because they would have to come not once but twice. There are a handful of providers among the South that have providers on site with North Carolina licensure, but that's not common to necessarily carry multi-state licenses in the Deep South. That was a very specific COVID thing, and a lot of us got lucky, especially with RNs having the multi-state compact license. But as this has continued, as time has gone on, there are more and more patients that can't receive care just because of increased obstacles. And one of the biggest obstacles is actually misinformation. because they think things are illegal before they get here. Recently, I'm sure a lot of you heard about the constitutional amendment proposed that would make it a legal defense to, for lack of better words, protect a fetus and potentially kill someone seeking an abortion or an abortion provider. This obviously did not pass, and it will not pass. But it caused enough hubbub and enough confusion that we had patients calling for weeks saying, can my husband kill me, or can my spouse, can my boyfriend kill me if I do this? And that's kind of what the point is. The cruelty is the point. I could do this for hours, but I don't want to horrify you.
I had a question. When you said you now have to go to 2 appointments, how far apart do the appointments have to be?
That's a great question. So in North Carolina, we have the longest waiting period between for informed consent, which is 72 hours. A patient has to wait at least 72 hours before they can come for a second appointment. 3 whole days. I would like to remind everyone that there is not an informed consent or waiting period for almost anything else, and particularly anything reproductive I can think of.
Diamond, Carolyn, what about your own experiences? About the challenges?
Well, with that, I think we have seen an increased rate of medication abortion, which has been a very positive thing that women know that is an option. But then, in addition to what Cal is saying, I think there's just this overall feeling of exhaustion for our providers that are being overburdened by the care that they have to provide, in addition to that fear of losing their medical license, and with that, their reputation and their source of income.
Well, you mentioned medication. Yeah, that is expanding access, but surgicals are still going to be needed. And so when these clinics are shut down, there's going to be a lack of care, even more so to do it. And as Callum mentioned with the 72 hours, that means people are traveling from Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and having to come up there and get in counseling, and then if they can't afford, and we can't help them afford to get lodging, they have to drive all the way back and then come back 72 hours later. So it's a huge barrier to it. So Diamond, next question is for you, please. Since we're talking about healthcare, what do you think are the implications for the healthcare workforce after Dobbs in 2023 at SB?
Several.
Go ahead.
There's several implications, especially if you are a provider who cares about the well-being of your community and feeling like your license is going to be attacked. How are you going to provide for your family? And you've gone to school and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that still need to be paid off. What then? And you see everything else they're doing with education and trying to make things, especially for us as nurses, not a profession, so we can continue to go to school and be able to provide care as providers and not physicians. That's a huge impact for us as a nursing profession. For the community at large, I believe the impact is being afraid, being scared, running the risk of not having the ability to pay. And you mentioned coming across state lines. I mean, has anybody looked at how much it costs to stay at the Westin or even the Hilton or a Motel 8? You know, it's not cheap. Nothing is cheap anymore. Food, gas, cell phone bills, all those expenses that compound on you daily. The extra stress of thinking about what am I gonna do? What is gonna be best for my family, and I can't get the care that I need. while and I think everyone in this room knows that I'm someone that did have an abortion, and it was my choice to have it, and we talked about it as a family and agreed upon it. People don't have those options anymore, or they're rushed to be able to get to the closest option and still having barriers to get it. It's frightening. It's frightening, and knowing that we are one of the only state in
One of the only states left in the South.
out of 6 states that connect to us. Like,
Georgia has a 6-week ban. It's called a cardiac activity ban. You've probably heard it called a heartbeat ban. That's kind of a misnomer because there is no heart at 6 weeks. It's more of contractile tissue. But that is the next closest state is Georgia. You can go further north to Virginia, but you have a lot fewer options because as a state, they have actually fewer clinics. I think, yeah, we have 15, including Planned Parenthoods in North Carolina. I think Virginia has somewhere between 6 and 8 if you count DC.
97 counties out of 100 do not have a
In North Carolina,
Yeah, North
97 counties do not have
clinic,
a clinic.
abortion clinic, or access to it. Yeah. So we're talking about travel and one thing I want to, because I think it's important, we're talking about patients, obviously they're extremely important and vital we speak on, but what about providers? Have y'all noticed providers changing jobs, having to move, having to make some kind of change in their lives, either to be able to keep providing this care, or they're like, I can't do it anymore?
I've been fortunate, so no. And I'm grateful for that, right? And I'm grateful for those friends that say, I'm gonna stay in this fight because it's the right thing to do, regardless of what's happening outside of these doors. I'm here to provide the care that is absolutely necessary for this patient, and I'm grateful for that. It's just gonna be a long haul. It's a long haul. We don't know what's gonna come next here in North Carolina, but I can absolutely hear the conversations that have been had about, what do I do? If this happens, what am I gonna do? What is my career path gonna be? Because that is not the path that I wanted to be on.
Caroline, have you experienced that or seen it? I'm sure you have in one way or another.
I have some with the military medicine providers. I've seen a mixed bag. Some say, under this administration, I don't want to be part of this. He's not my commander-in-chief, so I'm getting out of here. And then the other rationale with that is I could do more outside of the military, so in the private healthcare setting or public healthcare setting, to do more for women. I think the flip side of that is somebody's got to stay here and advocate for our service members, so it should be me. So it's really a mixed bag, but I think every women's health provider that I've encountered in the military has been very much an advocate of reproductive justice, and it's just person to person and very personality based on how they want to continue that fight.
Thank you. Along those lines, Caroline, your work has focused, incredible work, I just learned about it when we had our meeting, this is fantastic, on improving healthcare systems and solving complex challenges within federal healthcare. From your perspective, what changed after Dobbs that most people never know about or had heard about?
So I can go deep on this subject.
We like deep, go ahead.
So bear with me. So I mentioned at the beginning in my introduction that I've served the Office of Women's Health for the Navy, and part of that was that I was able to write the abortion policy for Navy medicine. So for some context with this, the Hyde Amendment is a federal law that restricts funds from being given for abortion care in certain situations. So the federal government can pay for abortion care in the 3 instances, which I'm sure you can all rattle off, that the military can pay for or provide care for an abortion in one of those three instances. With that, if a service member says to her provider, this has happened to me, I would like an abortion, now the rules are such that the provider will just push her forward for the health care that she needs. She does not have to file a formal complaint of sexual assault or request the permission of her chain of command. That used to be the case, which gives you the heebie-jeebies to think about. So with the change with Dobbs, that meant that abortion access is now controlled by the states. And our service members are stationed all across the US, and they don't get to choose where they're stationed and where they live. So with that, there's unequal access to reproductive health care based on where they live. So with our goal for the abortion policy for the Navy, we thought, well, how do we make access a little bit more equal, a little bit more fair for our service members who don't get to choose where they live? So we wrote a policy that granted three things while not providing the funds to provide the abortion care, because remember, that's not allowed because of the Hyde Amendment. So the policy, one, provided up to 20 weeks, where a 20 weeks gestation, where the service member could have the privacy to decide what she wanted to do with her pregnancy. Previously, she would have had to disclose her pregnancy the moment it was confirmed by a medical provider, giving her no privacy to make a decision. The second thing that it granted was an administrative absence to be able to travel to get the care you needed. So think like PTO or leave that was not charged against you. And then the third was travel allowance. So being reimbursed for the cost of travel that it took to go get the health care that you needed. So just as an example to ground this, we have service members that are stationed in Texas. And if you were a junior enlisted service member, you would have to travel to another state in order to get that reproductive health care. And specifically our junior enlisted members, so those that are not officers, they very, very little money because a lot of that is because their housing and health care is taken care of. So their cash on hand, if you will, is very limited, and they would not be able to afford to travel out of state, let alone to pay for the procedure. On the flip side, you have a lot of sailors stationed in California, and access is much better there. So there really was a disparity in terms of access. And then finally, one of the ways that we were able to get this passed into law for the Navy is that there's a positive return on investment for the military to make sure that women have the health care that they need. They stay in the service longer, they don't want to be pregnant, they don't have to be, which means that they are doing their job and not taking leave for the pregnancy and postpartum. So the dollars and cents, if you will, really make sense here. And if it didn't speak to someone morally, it did from the bottom line, which is how we were able to get that law passed.
That's incredible. How difficult was that?
It was time consuming, but it was not as hard to convince people to get on board as I would have thought. And that was very uplifting.
Thank you. So we're going to turn to North Carolina now. Oh, we have...
Yeah, I just have one question.
Sure.
Does that only apply to the service members in those branches, or their spouses as well?
That law only applies to active duty service members. Mm-hmm.
So concerning North Carolina, and I'll ask all three of you if you don't mind answering this, how do restrictions on abortion access intersect with broader health care issues like maternal health, economic security, health care, deserts that are going on? How do you think these restrictions intersect or impact? in your personal experience or work experience?
I think it's just compounding. You know, it's not isolated, and as you mentioned at the start of our program, the people that don't have resources are disproportionately affected by that, and it's just every instance that you mentioned just makes it bigger and bigger and harder of a barrier to overcome.
Has anyone ever participated in a poverty simulation? Yes. Yeah, right. So, if you've ever participated in a poverty simulation, you know that at any point in time, anything can happen. Your car can break down. The light bill is an extra $200. Daycare, you have to pay for daycare, and you missed a payment, and now they won't keep your kid, or your kid is sick, and they missed the bus. All of those things, especially considering that 97 counties don't have a clinic.
It's definitely over 90. I will say 97 might be a little high, but it's definitely over 90.
90 some odd counties here in the state of North Carolina don't have a clinic. Think about all the things you have to do. Think about living in poverty, because I'm considering most of those counties are rural counties. They already don't have providers there. They already don't have public transportation. The needs are already high. It is going to be an uphill battle to get what you need at any point in time. Just use it as a poverty simulation. You're increasing my chances of living in poverty because I can't have the access that I need. I can't get the health care that I need, because abortion access is health care, period. Like, this is just health care. I can't get that access, now what? And you also don't want to give me Medicaid. You also don't want to help with any additional funding to take care of this child. So you made an already difficult situation 1,000 times harder. And for what? Right? For what? Because you want to control a woman's body, a woman's mind, and her ability to take care of herself.
Y'all summed that up pretty well.
You mentioned, I think it's pretty obvious, it's all about control. A lot of this has to do with control. Why? Why do you think you're so hell-bent on controlling bodies, lives, futures? I know it's a multitude, and I'm not gonna make you give it to me in one word, but why do you think it is?
The professor is asking questions. I think the unfortunate reality is, especially in North Carolina, we are all very aware of how unfair the systems are. Whether it's a voting map, whether it's economic mobility, whether it's access to food, education, healthcare, the game is rigged. The need to control and the need for power really comes down to keeping that game rigged. Has less to do with things like religion, things like culture. It has everything to do with greed.
I would say greed, yes.
Yes,
Yes, and ego, yes, and just the pure misogynistic value of it, the paternalistic will to do whatever I want because I say so. I say so.
I think at the core of it, it's because they're scared. They are scared for women to run the world because things would be very different.
Thank you. Well, and it's interesting because this historically has happened when one group that had been underserved, underappreciated, suppressed, when they finally start getting some degree of power, that's when they come down so hard. And they start trying to get them at the certain points that quote unquote they find as weakness. Be it women, BIPOC community, immigrants, all the different things to do it. So you're right. Good. So thank you for that little trick question. Sorry to be here. I just wanted to know. Do it. How do you think North Carolina, both in the legislature and through healthcare, has stepped up to support these communities? And I'll add, how do you think they need to step up to support these underserved communities and marginalized?
So there is a bill, or was a bill, potential bill, where individuals who have been formerly incarcerated are now going to be able to get food stamps. That helps with recidivism and all those things. So maybe, just maybe, there's a slimmer of hope, maybe. But who knows? Who knows? We just have to wait it out and see. I don't see anything else that, yeah.
That's so sad.
We're going to have more uplifting questions in a moment, I promise.
I will give you one uplifting thing. I will say that as soon as Governor Stein took office, within the first couple of weeks, the first thing he did, or one of the first things he did, was an executive order to protect reproductive health care providers. I can tell you, for me personally, that was incredibly important because there was a fear that I would be extradited to another state if I got called to question for aiding and abetting. I do see patients from Texas. I'm not the provider and I'm not the physician, but I'm the one at the end of the day responsible because it's my clinic and I'm the one who runs it. So there have been multiple times where I haven't traveled to states. I missed a family wedding in Texas because I was scared I was gonna get picked up as soon as I got off the plane. So to have the governor say, hey, if you get this question, we're not gonna do this. We're not gonna even entertain this, was actually, for me, a very uplifting moment. Really low bar in hell. Very uplifting for a minute.
Take it, thank you. Organizations like Lillian's List work in various states to support electing pro-choice women into office. What does it mean to you all to have that support in general, and also as a member, Carolyn, as a board member?
I'm not a politician, so this is not my question. And I never will be.
You never know, say never. I mean, it meant the world to me as a former legislator, knowing that there were people behind me, even if I didn't know everyone's name, I didn't know where they lived, where they came from, I knew that there was someone who was behind me. And that kind of support, it helps you mentally, it helps you emotionally. Even when everything was going on, my office at the time was at the front of the building, and I could see out when everyone was coming in for the protest for the bill before I spoke on the floor. And just having, I still have a picture on my phone, taking pictures of people saying, yeah, thank you for being here. That helped. It helped tremendously because it can be very sad and very emotional knowing that, like, what? Really? You really want to do this to us? That was uplifting for me.
So I'll answer as a board member. So after Trump was elected for the second time, I found that to be very demoralizing. There's the repeat of my word for you. And I think it was so easy to get sucked into the vortex of the negative, fear-mongering news cycle. And then every time you look in the mirror, you just wonder, what's next? And what's happening to us, to me, to those around us. And I found Lillian's List as a very productive way to make change. And that felt like such a great outlet for me to feel like I can see all this negative hate, but I know I'm doing something positive to make a difference. And I have always felt very tied to the mission of Lillian's List, but it really went to the next level for me at our campaign kickoff event in April, because we got to see our new candidates do their stump speech and got to feel the energy in the room, and it was amazing. And it just makes you know that we can do this, we can make a difference.
What federal policies or court decisions do you think that people need to be paying attention to or be aware of that might be coming down the line in the next few years, next week, the way things are going sometimes? What do you think? Are there any you think that people need to be aware of or pay a little bit more attention to? Either one.
All right, I will say that something right now that a lot of folks know some about, maybe not the full picture, is the current debate and conflict over Mifeprex, and especially with the FDA. Mifeprex is also known as the abortion pill, mifepristone. Now that there are generics, I should not call it the brand name. I apologize. Mifepristone has been approved by the FDA for well over 20 years, and this is something that is constantly being under review. After Dobbs, there was a set of regulations, it's called a REMS, basically that tells you how you can use this medication according to the FDA, and it's approved. The post-Dobbs REMS allowed for telemedicine and the mailing of pills. It also made it easier to give mifepristone further along in gestation. It used to be, when it was originally created, 7 weeks, and it became 9. Now, standard is technically 11.0, but people can push to 11.6 without issue. However, with this administration, they're trying so hard to revert back to the 2016 REMS, which means you could not use mifepristone past 9 weeks. And you cannot mail it. It has to be taken in a brick and mortar clinic, handed to you physically by a physician. This obviously will make a massive impact on access. Whether it's general telemedicine through a provider or buying pills online through a third-party vendor or organization, nonprofit, whatever that may shape itself out to be, it will impact access. A very odd thing about the Dobbs decision is the instances of reported abortion have actually increased post-Dobbs. What has decreased is the amount of abortions inside brick and mortar clinics. Telemedicine is hard to quantify exactly because, especially with third-party and nonprofit groups and not necessarily physicians providing pills, but it accounts for approximately 30%, that's the guess. This has pros and cons. Pro is that there is more access. People are getting access to care even if they're in a state that they might not have the ability to walk into a healthcare facility to find. The con is all of the providers that are left are not getting that income to stay open because people are buying pills online. The thing about brick and mortars is that's the only way to get a surgical abortion. It has to be done in the clinic. So it's a very odd, I guess for lack of better words, it's a very odd crossroads because there's no winning here at this point. But it's something that everyone should be very mindful of and aware of because there's a real possibility that at any given moment the FDA can just change their mind of how we use this med.
Yeah, and then you have the Comstock laws kind of hovering above us because they're coming after the pills, but I hope you know that's also contraception too, and anything connected to abortion. Gloves, things that you'd use in every day, if they're in any way, shape, or form connected. So that's, Comstock's still there. I mean, of course we have something from the 1800s that still impacts us, makes sense. All right, so my last two questions I want to ask of all three of you. So, first one is, as we kind of look ahead, what is one thing you hope people in this room or beyond continue learning about after they leave tonight? And what's one thing you hope that they'll do with that knowledge? So what's one thing you hope they've learned or interested in, and what do you want them to do with that?
Most important thing, I believe, is that everyone here is already a Lillian's List supporter, right? That you continue to support Lillian's List, and that you continue to support candidates who are really thinking about the overall well-being of the community and for women's health, period, because this is our health. One thing that I want you to take with you is to bring someone else, right? Not just, because everybody looks familiar, right? And I'm glad, I'm grateful for that. Bring new people. They are out there. They need to hear this information. They need to be a part of the conversation so that they can take it with them. And I'm talking about younger adults as well. I'm a woman of a certain age now, I can say that, oh God. I'm a woman of a certain age now, but same thing, I need to bring younger people with me so that the fight continues. That they have the knowledge and the skill set to activate in the communities that they're in, to bring other people forward.
I hope the thing that everybody takes away is that they feel empowered to do something, to make change, because we are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the election this fall, and then in the coming presidential election. And then, at Lillian's List, we really are trying to flip the house. So if you are able, looking at our endorsed candidates that are in districts that have been gerrymandered to end up Republican, so specifically, I think it's Alma Hairston in Guilford County and Claire Kempner in Pitt County. They are Lillian's List endorsed candidates. They're very strong and they have the potential to help us flip the house. So if you feel called and are able to do so, please give to them.
I'll shift gears slightly. I hope something that folks take away from here is knowing that all of these issues, whether it's abortion access, whether it's BIPOC, LGBTQIA community in healthcare, whether it's access for economic mobility, schools, what have you, every single one of these issues are connected. Nothing exists in a vacuum. That being said, I really hope folks walk out of here with the idea that we have to put progress over perfection. There is no such thing as a perfect candidate. There's no such thing as a perfect solution, because you have to make that call and you have to move forward. I think that's something we're seeing a lot of issues with across the board, is an increased amount of tribalism in this country and the inability to see past our own feelings and emotions. We have to get past wanting to be right. We just want to have progress. That being said, I also hope that when you're leaving here, and I absolutely agree bringing people with you to the table, I also hope that everyone takes a second and checks their own pulse and takes care of themselves. This is a long haul, and I see some faces in here that have been ardent advocates for years. Yes, I'm gonna let everybody goes. But people who have been doing this work for years. You can work for the people beside you, for yourselves, and just for a better future, but you gotta take care of yourself to do it.
I don't even need that second question now, thank you. No, because I think, obviously, with Lillian's List of talking about the importance of election and coming together as a community. So you did that. Thank you. Thank you, all three, for joining us. And we're going to have in a second a Q&A, so you can ask our panelists questions. But I just really briefly want to say, simply just being in this room matters. It says that you care not only about abortion, reproductive rights, you care about community, and you care about change. And I think you're realizing it, hopefully even a little bit more, that individuals are how things change. Individuals working together as a community, and that the single law, single court case is not going to be the deciding factor of all. It does not have to be the deciding factor of it all. Change can happen, but change has to come through community, and it has to come through having some pretty darn difficult conversations, asking yourself difficult questions, your friends, and just learning, educating yourself. And coming here tonight is one of the key ways to do it. So we appreciate you all joining us this evening. So I will open up the floor for any questions.
Changing the mood a little bit. I'd like to ask sort of a positive question, which is looking toward the future and toward progress and the change we want to see. I want to know what it's going to take and how long you think, once we get better people in government, it'll take. Now, I assume to make changes in the state that we would need to flip the state legislature. And then would we look to them to at least repealing the laws or taking back to where they were, but also nationally, once we get a better Congress, what should they be doing? Would it take a constitutional amendment to establish abortion for the country, or are there other laws that they can enact? What do you all envision happening?
I can take it. I can take it.
So, do you want to know what it's going to take, or how long is it going to take?
Yes.
Okay. Oh gosh. I wish I could read the tea leaves. I think it's going to take the states flipping their houses. I think it's going to take our national, Congress being flipped, and I think it's going to take a different administration. And with that different administration, I think it's going to take different heads of each of our agencies. So different lead for the CDC, different Surgeon General, you name it.
What about a larger Supreme Court?
That sounds lovely.
I got so excited by your question, I forgot to ask Maya to come up here. Were I supposed to have you come up first?
Oh, no.
Oh, you don't mind? Okay, I tend to go in my own.
No,
Yeah,
no.
I'm sorry. I didn't know what you were getting when you asked me.
the mic for
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
This is something I think I should know the answer to, so my apologies. I just read an article about a woman in Texas where some of you may have also read it. Basically couldn't get the help that she needed when she was having a miscarriage. And I don't know if abortion clinics here could have helped her, since the ER could not help her. And I'll go further, as I understand it, she thought that she was past the miscarriage, and they were on a family trip, I don't know, days, weeks later, and she found out that it was not finished. So again, whatever was done to help her in the ER when she almost died wasn't enough. And so I don't know, can our clinics help someone like that here in North Carolina?
I'm gonna defer to Calla.
So what you're referring to is something called wraparound care. And this is something that, as a whole, abortion providers have really been discussing, how do we make this happen? How can we make this network? How can we be available for patients coming from different places who might have gotten a procedure done in North Carolina but went home to Alabama and maybe they had a complication? Are there former providers available that can help them? Because Alabama used to have providers. This is an ongoing process amongst abortion providers because we don't think it's possible to make that type of national connection outside. The states aren't gonna do this. This is not gonna happen at a corporate level. I don't think Atrium is gonna make friends with another state's, whatever their main hospital system is to make this happen. It's really difficult to comprehend because there's so much liability involved. Anytime the first person who has a contact with the patient to the last person who has contact with the patient, depending on how your state operates, how your medical malpractice is, there's a possibility that every single person who can't touch that patient will be equally responsible for any issue. A lot of hospital systems are really almost aggressively discouraging their providers from working with outside providers and independent clinics because they want to protect themselves from these malpractice moments. And there's a lot of places that are now enforcing non-compete clauses. It's about safety and liability, but there are clinics that want to do this work.
So if she were in North Carolina and had walked into one of your clinics,
We would evaluate her. Like any patient who came in, we would evaluate them. The question would have to be, because I don't know exactly which case you're talking about, but any patient, we've seen several patients from other states who've had procedures done but had complications, or maybe had retained tissue, incomplete abortion, continuing pregnancy. These are all complications, they are known. We evaluate them as they come in. If it's something we can do in a freestanding clinic, we will do it.
she had not, as I understand, she had not had an abortion. She was having a
Miscarriage. And even then, we would treat it like an abortion because a miscarriage, it's a misnomer.
So if she walked into one of your clinics,
We would evaluate her.
You would do what you could to help her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's safe to say for almost any independent provider. I can't speak to other organizations because I know that hospital systems have their own, like I said, liability, they have their own process, but just about any independent clinic would absolutely evaluate them for care.
Thank you for doing that.
Since you mentioned independent clinics, and some people don't know there's a difference.
Oh, this is something we get a lot of questions about.
Yes, please.
So there's a difference between, obviously, Planned Parenthood, which is an organization that has multiple different affiliates. It's not one overarching group. It is multiple affiliates in different regions that have different healthcare centers that do different healthcare things. It's not just abortion. While they do a ton of abortions nationwide altogether, in aggregate, they also do a lot more things. So this is where independent clinics come in. Independent abortion clinics, for the most part, are basically free-standing medical practices, like family practices and things like that. Very similar concept, but they specialize in abortion care. Some can be set up as for-profit companies. Most of them are, just because it's the most economically sound and viable option. There are some folks who do the 501c3 nonprofit route. That can get a little scary and shaky depending on where you are because of things like the Hyde Amendment and things that are preventing funding from being used in abortion care. That being said, independent clinics do at this point, a majority of the abortions in the United States. It is something that gets a little kind of lost in translation sometimes, but the purpose of an independent clinic is to be able to prioritize abortion care.
Any other questions?
Thank you. So with the changes in healthcare coverage, how does that impact women's ability to access maternal health care, because I don't like just to refer to it as abortion, because I think it is maternal health care that women are seeking for various reasons. So how has insurance and the inability for people to sustain their insurance impacted the situation?
I'm gonna defer to Diamond just because most independent clinics actually, for abortion access, cannot process insurance. Most insurance does not cover abortion specific. So in terms of the maternal health care aspect, so in a large maternal scale.
Yeah, so everyone has to really look at their policy, especially when it's time to renew and you're at your job. You have to really look and see what care is under that plan. Even if there are several different plans that you can pick from, you may have a higher premium plan where you're going to be paying for all of your care out of pocket at the beginning, and then it gets better at the end of the year. Or if you're on a copay plan, that may be easier for people, but you really have to look at the policy and call the insurance company to see exactly what's provided, because they won't tell you.
Do most insurance plans cover maternal health?
No.
I can speak to that.
No, no, they don't. Yeah, you can give her the money. Yeah.
No, most insurance plans do not cover it, and probably 40+% of insured patients here in North Carolina are Blue Cross, and they do not cover it. Abortion care. Medicaid only covers abortion care in the 3 instances that you talked about before. And, you know, there's obviously a lot of paperwork associated with that too. I think the issue that you were talking about with a patient coming into the ER, typically what would happen in that situation is that they would consult an OBGYN who would then evaluate the patient and determine what the care should be based on the standard of care. Now, not every OBGYN in the country operates at the standard of care. Not everybody does the right thing all the time. But I do feel like, at least in our area, both at Atrium and Novant, the OBGYN community works very well together, and the OBGYN community across the country, we have networks of us that help get patients the care that they need from various places. For instance, I took care of a patient who was flying to Charlotte to be with family that needed an abortion for a fetal anomaly that she couldn't get in Texas or whatever. And most of these are a direct, like, doctor reaching out to a doctor that they know in that area and personally coordinating care for the patient. And not every doctor is willing to do that. I think this is my partner, Dr. Stone. I think we feel really strongly about that, and we go out of our way to help people in that way. Not everyone's willing to do that, but fortunately, most doctors in Charlotte, at least, know who we are, and that we are a huge resource for when they don't know what to do. I think we feel a lot of those questions.
Also regarding contraception.
Yeah, I think your question also talked about contraception. Like, what is insurance going to do to contraception? I don't know if you have a comment, but as of now, my patients are getting covered for birth control and IUDs.
Yeah, but before the Affordable Care Act, many women were not able to get IUDs. It was a huge problem. People were being charged $1,000 per device. And many, the most vulnerable, poorest patients can't afford that. If the Affordable Care Act goes away, IUD coverage will go away too. One of the things that we've seen a lot since the Dobbs decision and since Trump's first and second presidencies is patients coming in wanting permanent sterilization at a higher rate. I had a consultation with a 20-year-old patient today that wants her fallopian tubes removed because she knows for certain she's not want to get pregnant in the future. And she came into that conversation or to that visit with me very apprehensive, thinking I was going to make her have a waiting period or talk to her family or things like that. And she apparently I'm on some list of people who will tie anyone's tubes. but it's, yeah, anybody you wanna send our way, we're happy to do it. But there's no other healthcare decision that is made between doctors and patients that is regulated like this. And even with, permanent sterilization, Medicaid won't cover that without them being 21 years old, and they have to sign a consent form 30 days in advance to be able to even have that done. What do you have to add to that?
These girls are scared, they're coming in really scared.
Yeah.
That their rights are gonna be taken away, that they
Yeah, our transgender patients want hysterectomies yesterday. I don't know what else you think.
just the fear and the urgency.
It's a lot of fear and a lot of urgency, and people that have IUDs currently that are like, go ahead and swap it out because I want another 8 years on this bad boy in case the laws change. Yeah.
So if I might add, I think that's actually something that the military is doing really well. So a few years ago, we passed a law or a policy, and it's called Contraceptive Access to Care, and it gives all service women access to any contraception of their choice, and they don't have to have a provider's, quote, permission to select the choice that they want. Now, if there are gonna be complications, obviously, they need to go under the advisement of the healthcare provider that is prescribing them, but they do have access to the full range. Second, I guess it was in 2022, we stood up what we call walk-in contraceptive clinics at 2 fleet concentration areas in the Navy, which just means that there are big naval bases right there. So essentially what service women could do is walk into the clinic and say, I need the contraception of my choice today, and they were able to get it. Unless it was an IUD and they had to come back and have a procedure follow-up. But if it was Nexplanon, which is the arm implant, or a pill, you name it, they could get it right then and there.
I have one more thing I want to speak to. Sorry. About the South and people moving and like having different levels of access to care, like you were talking about with military women. Now, many really competitive, really amazing OBGYN physicians are not going to those states. People are not going there for their residency training because most of us want training in abortion care. And male residents are not taking their wives there because what if my wife gets pregnant and something's abnormal as a resident? We can't afford to travel across state lines, to get her the health care that she needs. So there are already huge healthcare deserts all over the country, but I'm very focused on the South, and it's only going to get worse and worse and worse, and the only doctors that are going to be practicing there are doctors that don't know how to do it.
So you ready?
I also, because I do think people probably don't know this, abortion care is not a standard thing taught in medical school.
It's opt-in.
It's opt-in only. And if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of medical schools don't even offer it. It's opt-in.
It would be in residency training.
In residency,
so medical school is kind of like a broad, scope of things, and then in residency training, I did my residency training here at CMC. She did hers at MUSC, and I was the only resident in my class of 6, the class above me of 6, and the class below me of 6 that wanted the training, which was very eye-opening to me coming here as a resident. I just thought, everybody's young and female, and like, why would we not do it? It ended up being a great experience for me because I did all of them in residency. So I did lots of complicated cases and, trained with someone who trained in New York doing abortions up to 24, 26 weeks. So I got great experience, and that's how I kind of became a main referral source for doctors here. But it's really surprising to me how many opt out of that.
How many opted in and out of yours? In Charleston,
Right, there was actually a family program, like family planning residence or fellowship that you could do. And then you could, when you're on that rotation as a resident, you would learn, but you could opt in or out.
I get that question a lot, so thank you for adding some context to that.
There was a specific instance during residency that really hit home for me when I was, working as a second-year resident or something, and a patient came into the ER with a septic abortion at 15 weeks. So this is a fetus that is dead, and now the woman has a life-threatening infection, and so she needs uterine evacuation immediately.
and the attending that was on that night had not been trained in second trimester D&E and was planning to open her, which would have killed her. And so I called one of the other attendings and pulled her out of bed to come in and do this procedure. I'm like, that will never be me.
Thank you for caring. Thank you for caring for her.
This is what I was talking about. I mean, sharing stories and conversations. That's one way, and I'm sure plenty of people in here have some ideas of how we can bring change about and work together. You may not want to talk all about it tonight, but I'm sure if you have questions for anyone afterwards, we're more than welcome to answer them. I now want to bring up Maya Tucker from Lillian's List to close out the evening, please.
Thank you, Shannon. Can we give a round of applause for joining us tonight. You know, Lillian's List, we are here to train and recruit and support pro-choice women running for office, and just, you know, continuing to educate communities across the state. So we're grateful for you guys to join us this evening. If you have it in your heart, there are QR codes on each table, so if you want to continue some of this work and help us grow, we would greatly appreciate it. But thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your evening.